You know SpongeBob SquarePants, the happy-go-lucky sponge, and his friends? There's a fan theory out there that actually breaks it down how the 7 deadly sins is related to SpongeBob SquarePants. We're going to start off with the first sin, which is pride. Sandy Cheeks is seen as the embodiment of pride due to her deep satisfaction derived from her achievements. Her pride extends to her home country, athletic prowess, and successful career as a scientist. Yet, what exactly does she do as a scientist? We'll cover that in another video as we move on to the second sin, which is greed. The most obvious one in the show that is embodied by Mr. Krabs himself. Mr. Krabs' selfish desires for wealth and power. His obsession for collecting money exemplifies this sin as he pursues riches for his own gratification. Mr. Krabs is also one that will topple over anybody, even his friends, in order to gain the wealth he desires. The third sin is going to be lust, and that is embodied by no other than the whale of the show, Pearl. The adopted daughter of Mr. Krabs is always characterized by her intense sexual desires and always depicted as being extremely boy crazy and infatuated with many male fish stars, which makes Pearl the ideal candidate for lust. For number 4, we're going with envy, and that is represented by no other than Mr. Krabs' rival, Plankton, who is seen as the embodiment of envy for harboring an insatiable desire for success achieved by his rival, Mr. Krabs. Plankton is always out there trying his best to one-up or steal everything Mr. Krabs owns, and he's always going to be jealous of everything Mr. Krabs has achieved. For number 5, we're going with gluttony, and this is represented perfectly by Miss Puff herself. As we know, gluttony is simply the embodiment of overindulgence, and Miss Puff herself overindulges in food. She loves various foods from chocolate cakes to pastas, so this is the perfect personification of this. However, I will also say Patrick Star himself could also be a contender for this sin. However, he comes up later in this video. Number 6, we're going with wrath, which is Squidward. Squidward embodies wrath as he's characterized by his uncontrollable feelings of anger and hatred for the stupidity of all those around him. His resentment towards his life, his job, his neighbors, and the Bikini Bottom residents in general reflects this sin perfectly. For number 7, we're going with Sloth, which represents no other than Patrick Star himself. As we know, Sloth is the representation of excessive laziness. Patrick Star represents that perfectly with his unemployment status, his resident under a rock, and his long extended periods of sleeping. Now, with that being said, Patrick Star himself is the sin of sloth. Now, I know what you're saying. Wait, but aren't those all the sins, the 7 deadly sins? Where's SpongeBob? Well, let me be very honest with you. SpongeBob himself is not one to fall on this list simply for the fact that Nickelodeon actually released an official confirmation that SpongeBob simply embodies positivity and optimism. So if anything, SpongeBob himself is the opposite of his friends and co-workers. He is the opposite of sins, and in pure nature, SpongeBob is the one you would want to be, as SpongeBob has a genuine love for the world.